Lately, there have been some mock drafts that have supplied the Colts with picks ranging from great to downright outrageous. And we're going to tell you what we think today. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you guys get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 if your bet wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. What is up, friends? This is Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks from horseshoehuddle.com. And we are here today to mock the mocks, I guess you could say. So there have been some big ones that have come out in the last week or so. Specifically last week, we did kind of a roundup. There were some we really enjoyed. There were some that made us kind of scratch our head. And Zach even put out his own little piece of content, not a mock draft, but just a really good, realistic look at some day two picks that we'll finish off the show with today. But first, we're going to pull up the mock draft from ESPN draft expert Matt Miller. This was probably the one that caught the most attention from Colts fans over the last week. Now, I like to give everyone the benefit of the doubt on these and kind of see where they're coming from. But this is a 7-rounder, and it didn't take about midway through, Zach, until I finally was on board with something. I did not like it. I will say it was a predictive one too. So I don't think the purpose was to get chaotic. This was stated as a predictive draft. So I'll roll through all 7 rounds, and then Zach and I will primarily kind of poke out a few of these here. So round 1, pick 15 was Texas defensive tackle Byron Murphy. Round 2, Marshawn Nealand, the edge defender from Western Michigan. Round 3 was Missouri corner Chris Abrams-Drain. Round 4, Georgia safety Tyke Smith. Round 5, wide receiver Taj Washington out of USC. Round 6, Trevor Keegan, the offensive tackle out of Michigan. And then they finish up in round 7 with Temple linebacker Jordan McGee. So when we're maybe not so friendly about things, I think it's always a good thing to give people the opportunity to maybe speak on it. So Matt Miller did do a good job of explaining his picks throughout the first 3 rounds. So here it is for Byron Murphy. Now, my thing still, Zach, is defensive tackle in general is really not a need at all. And if you're going to do it, it's probably like round 3 at the earliest. And there are some really talented players in this draft, Murphy included. He's my number 1 interior defender. But the Colts just, that would be such a luxury pick. They just gave Grover Stewart a $39 million contract with over $25 million guaranteed. And this still has Quinion Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, Cooper DeJean, A.D. Mitchell, and Xavier Worthy all still on the board. So I think people would have every right to be pretty bummed about that pick.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is, you guys know me, I like to look back at Chris Ballard's draft history and really try to decipher like what he's going to go in the draft, what he's going to do come draft day. And, fun fact here for all you guys listening right now, Chris Ballard has drafted every single position like in football in the top 100, aside from kicker and punter, but those aren't real positions. So aside from, every real position, he has drafted every single position at least once within the top 100, except for interior defensive line. Never happened with the Colts. Grover Stewart was his highest pick at the position. I think that was in like the middle of round 4 back in 2017. Then you got guys like Eric Johnson and Curtis Brooks and stuff like that. He's never spent a top 100 pick on an interior defensive lineman. So for him to take one all the way at 15 when he's already got DeForest Buckner. They just re-signed Grover Stewart. They just signed Raekwon Davis. They just re-signed Taven Bryan. They have Adetomi Adebawore. I don't know. It just seems a little much there. And look, these 32 team 7-round mocks are insanely hard because you can't be an insider for every team. But I think this was a little bit of overthinking when it comes to this one for Matt Miller, and also hey, I need Byron Murphy to go somewhere, so why not to the Colts? It just doesn't make sense for the Colts. So they need a corner. They could use a receiver. I could even see an edge rusher here at 15, but I just don't see interior defensive linemen in the top 15 for the Colts. I don't see interior defensive linemen in the top 100 for the Colts in this draft. Maybe they take one on day 3, but I'd be absolutely shocked if they took a guy like Byron Murphy at 15, who's a fantastic player, really good player. But again, Chris Ballard has not taken interior defensive lineman in the top 100 in his time with the Colts. He's drafted every other position in the top 100 before that. It's just not interior defensive line. So I just can't see Byron Murphy being the Colts pick at 15 in any circumstance.
Not to mention it takes interior guys a long time to develop. And what is his role? I mean, is the Adetomi role where, he plays sparingly, but you just drafted this guy at 15 in this scenario. So it's like, are you just give this guy 5 to 10 snaps a game? Even though, we have discussed ad nauseum lately, this draft class really needs to hit and have immediate impact guys. So moving along to second round, Marshawn Kneeland. Now this is a team fit, and neither of us would be shocked if the Colts went with an edge defender on this one. But you got a defensive line on a defense that just put up over 50 sacks last year, and your first 2 picks are a defensive tackle and a defensive end. And it's neither of them are a position where you really lost anybody. So I think that's pretty iffy. And especially there's fits like Ricky Pearsall, Malachi Corley, safety Tyler Nubin, corner TJ Tampa, Troy Franklin, Bullard, Sanders. They're all still on the board. And it's gosh, I just it literally just felt like putting names onto the board for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, I don't know. Kneeland's fine. When I did my build of Ballards for edge rusher for the draft guide, he does fit what the Colts like, but it's still not this perfect fit. He's kind of that tweener mold, like a Taekwon Lewis and a Dio Dengbo, but he's not as athletic as those two. Again, Miller even puts it here in his write-up here, 4.75 in the 40, 35-inch vertical jump, 6'3", 267. He has good length too, but I don't know. It's kind of a Ballard fit, so it wouldn't shock me too much. But even if we're saying they need to take an edge rusher in the top 50, I don't know. Kneeland, to me, I think there's other guys besides Kneeland who make more sense for the Colts in terms of what Ballard likes. But again, of his top 100 picks that he gave the Colts here in this mock draft, I think this is the least surprising one because I can see it. But again, Marshawn Kneeland just doesn't really move the needle for me personally. I prefer a wide receiver here, a cornerback, or even a different edge rusher, which we'll talk about in the final segment. There's a couple other edge rushers I'd prefer here in round 2 over Kneeland. So yeah, just another head scratcher. I'm not very high on Kneeland, so I don't know if this is a great pick according to the board, but I don't know. It's just another one where I'm man, I don't really get it. I don't really get it here at 46.
Yeah. And then so third round is Chris Abrams, draining the corner out of Missouri. Now we've been standing here saying the Colts do need another corner before the draft, at least someone capable of starting. It doesn't have to be a star. But Drain is another guy he's not a no doubt starter, and he's probably slated to be a slot at the next level, which you already have Kenny Moore at a brand new contract. So that's, if you're drafting a corner in the first few rounds, you're looking for a higher impact than that. And it probably needs to come in the first or second round, or if it's in the third round, it's someone who is inexplicably fallen.
Yeah. And again, Chris Ballard has his type at corner. I've never really seen him break his type. I mean, he broke it for Isaiah Rodgers, but that was more of a kick returner type role. He broke it for Jalen Jones in terms of athleticism, but he's been on record 100 times saying that Jalen Jones is not the type of guy that he would take, and he's given his pro scout all the credit in the world for that pick there. So I think if we see a corner selection, it's going to be more of the Chris Ballard type. Quinyon Mitchell, who dominated the Senior Bowl and has that kind of dog mentality that you look for early in the draft, or a Cam Hart type guy on day 2, where it's that bigger, lengthier guy who's physical and gets in guys' faces. TJ Tampa makes a lot of sense as well. So again, going with Chris Abrams Drain, it feels like a it feels like a non-Chris Ballard pick to me. Like, and I think, Matt Miller typically is fairly keyed in to Chris Ballard. I'm not going to say very keyed in because of the Will Levis thing last year, but he's fairly keyed in to what Ballard likes. So I don't know. This is just a weird mock draft. I did like some of the day 3 picks. Tyke Smith, very good player from Georgia. I liked a couple of the other guys there, but for the most part, it's mock draft season. We're not going to be too harsh on it because, again, a guy has to do 32 teams for 7 rounds. You're not going to get every single team right, but this was one that I saw a lot of Colts fans talking about and Reddit and on Twitter and stuff. And yeah, I mean, it was worth it. It was worth all the talk about it because it was kind of a weird, wonky draft, especially when we get to this next segment, talking about all the mock drafts around NFL media and who they're giving the Colts. Just seeing Byron Murphy in round 1 in this one, and then only corner and everybody else's. It was kind of funny to see.
Yeah, and like the final 2 picks, Trevor Keegan and Jordan McGee, probably pretty fine picks and very on brand for the Colts. I feel like that feels very realistic to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wish I liked the first couple days better than day 3. But what are you going to do? So yeah, like Zach mentioned, we're going to go and kind of take a look at what some of the other draft experts from around the World Wide Web have in store for the Colts. Guys, right now the sports calendar is loaded and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action. Because right now, new customers, you guys get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. Locally, Purdue fans, it finally happened. Final Four for the first time in a million years. So what are you waiting for? If you are a new customer, go ahead and win that $5 bet on anything Purdue related in this tournament. Just go and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Zach. So we'll go ahead and start out here with the Move the Sticks podcast, essentially. Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks, they both recently put out mocks, and they both have the Colts taking Quinyon Mitchell at number 15. Right now, if you and I were going to take a poll, or at least guns to our head, that's probably 1A or 1B of who we think the Colts would be going with if he was available on the board.
Yeah. Quinyon Mitchell makes a ton of sense for the Colts. He was my Bill to Ballard cornerback too, and that's even with him not posting the typical explosion metrics and the typical arm length that the Colts look for. But when you watch him on film, I mean, this is a guy who just looks like a Chris Ballard type of corner. He's got that physical mentality. He's really good in his zone drops. He's a great tackler. He's physical, like I just mentioned, and he also dominated the Senior Bowl. And I go back to that Rock Ya-Sin season, and I know Rock Ya-Sin didn't technically work out here with the Colts, but I go back to the highest cornerback that Chris Ballard has taken is Rock Ya-Sin, and that was off the heels of this just fantastic Senior Bowl performance that he had against Deebo Samuel. And now I'm looking at Quinyon Mitchell, and I'm watching the Senior Bowl from this past year and just saw how good he was. And I just remember how Ballard fell in love with Rock Ya-Sin in that performance. So it makes a lot of sense from that perspective. I think Quinyon Mitchell just feels like a Colts corner. And if he's there at 15, I could definitely see them pulling the trigger.
Absolutely. And corner is pretty common occurrence here. We'll go over some of the other cornerback ones because I think it's pretty interesting because we've talked a lot about Mitchell more so than these other guys, especially as of late. So Charles Davis of NFL.com and Rick Spielman of CBS both had Cooper DeJean, which, we both think, Cooper's going to have his personal workout here in a couple weeks on April 15th. So we'll see what scores come out of that. He's got the broken, or he is cleared from the broken fibula or broken leg, essentially. I don't know all the leg bones, but he had a broken leg that caused him to not be able to work out at the combine and all this good stuff. But he's finally working out for scouts on the 15th. And the Colts have been patient with injured draft picks. Dio Adangbo had blown his Achilles just in January of that year. Julian Blackman had torn an ACL in the Pac-12 championship game, which November, December, whatever. So they've got a track record of, it doesn't, as long as this injury isn't like career threatening, like, come on, let's do it. This is a talented player. So Cooper DeJean is one. And then Terrion Arnold, who I I think for a lot of people has been overtaken by Quinyon Mitchell as the number one corner in this draft. Arnold was viewed as the top guy for a while. Now, still very fluid mover, very physical, has a great mentality to the position flexibility. He's just a little smaller and a little slower than Mitchell, but still great tape and deserving of being the top corner on whoever's board.
Yeah, it was funny. The Colts.com, I think is JJ released, a mock draft roundup. And so I was looking at that before we jumped on today to make sure that we had, all the prominent mock drafts in here. And if you're just scrolling through all of them, it's, Quinyon Mitchell, Quinyon Mitchell, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Terrion Arnold, Terrion Arnold, Terrion Arnold. So
Yep.
it's like, okay, where do the national guys think the Colts are going at 15? It's probably cornerback, and I don't blame them. And you look at our cornerback room. Yeah, I totally get it. But going with Terrion Arnold versus Cooper DeJean, I think DeJean probably fits more of the Chris Ballard mold than Arnold does, because Arnold, again, a little bit slower, a little bit undersized for the typical mold, a little bit shorter arms, that kind of stuff is just not going to play to the typical Chris Ballard type. But again, former safety, has done a lot of great things in college, very fluid mover. For me personally, he's my cornerback one still. I think he has some fantastic tape, and I think he's going to be a great pro. So, he's another player where, like, yes, maybe not like this grade A tier 1 Chris Ballard fit, but a guy who I still think is going to be on the Colts radar because of what he put on film, because of that physicality, because of, being a safety turned a corner and still being productive that way. And then Cooper DeJean, we were talking about this at the combine quite a bit, where Cooper DeJean just feels like a Chris Ballard player in terms of the demeanor, the personality, the play style, the playmaking. And also, when you take a guy like Cooper DeJean, you're not only getting this cornerback who can take the ball away and be great in his zone drops and maybe play some safety, but you're also getting a great punt returner, one of the best punt returners in this entire class, a guy who can step back there from day one and be a plus player for your team. So, it's funny. I talked to a couple guys, and I talked to this one guy who is a little bit in tune with Philly. And he was like, yeah, I kind of like Cooper DeJean for the Eagles there in round 1. And my only fear is Chris Ballard at 15 with him, because it just feels like a Chris Ballard type of guy. So yeah, I could totally see any of these guys being the pick. Obviously, DeJean, it comes down to what he does at his private pro day. But DeJean, Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell, would all be pretty good picks, I think, at 15 for the Colts. I mean, especially over Byron Murphy. I mean, no, I'm just messing around, but Byron Murphy's fine. But I would prefer one of these guys over someone like Murphy, or even, some of the other players we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and these last couple here, Kyle Stackpole of CBS has Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, the wide receiver, and which makes all the sense in the world. We've talked about, if there's a receiver that's most likely to be picked by the Colts at 15, Thomas makes a lot of sense. And then who I think is probably the most common dark horse pick for the Colts, if he's there, is Dallas Turner. I've seen that a lot. I've thought of it myself. It makes a lot of sense if he's available. Again, it's not necessarily a need, but it's a position that I could see Chris Ballard saying, my God, we're sitting at 15 in the top edge in the class who checks all of our boxes is available. Are we really going to pass that up?
Yeah, that was from Danny Kelly at the Ringer. Does some great work over there at the Ringer. He had the Colts taking Dallas Turner, and I do think that's the one edge rusher where, if he's there at 15, I do think the Colts would select him. We know all the reports this offseason of the Colts making a push for Danielle Hunter. That one didn't pay out, and I don't think that necessarily means that they're trying to get an edge rusher in the draft, but I do think if someone like Dallas Turner were to fall to them, where, like, yes, he's a little bit shorter and he's a little bit undersized for the typical mold, but he's got the arm length, he's got the explosion, he's got the speed, he's got the production in college. I mean, he was producing since he was a true freshman at Alabama. So yeah, Dallas Turner makes a ton of sense for the Colts. I think this is the one edge rusher where if he's there at 15, the Colts are going to be like, you know what? Positional value, or not positional value, but positional needs be damned. We're going to take Dallas Turner and just go with it. I think that one makes a ton of sense. But I did add the Kyle Stackpole one to Brian Thomas Jr. because I feel like we need to get some receiver in here.
Right.
And right before we started recording, I did see that the Bleacher Report crew, their scouting department, they did have the Colts taking Brian Thomas Jr. as well in their mock draft. So I think if you look at all these national ones, you see the same couple of names, but there is a little bit of diversity. There's an edge rusher, there's a couple corners, and then Brian Thomas Jr. So we'll have to see what happens obviously coming forward. But some really cool names there. You guys let us know in the comment section what you think and where you would go among all those players. And then coming up, we're going to talk about a recent article that I wrote talking about day 2 players. We talked a lot about round 1 guys today. We're going to talk about some day 2 players that I think is kind of flying under the radar for Colts fans that make a lot of sense for what the Colts and Chris Ballard like on draft day. But first, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you go for a run, take a nap, read a book, or show up for a friend? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze in that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. And again, I've said this multiple times on here, guys. The thing that matters the most to me is my dog. My dog, Pudge, matters to me more than anything in the world. So I got to make more time for him. He's running around here somewhere trying to get my attention as we speak. So I got to make some time for him the second that this show is done recording. If you're thinking of starting therapy, though, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked-on. Alrighty, Locked On Colts fans, we are jumping into our final segment today where we're talking about this article I wanted to write, basically to preface it, is I've seen a lot of the mock draft simulators, guys. I've seen a lot of people having the same kind of guys on day 2. You know, Cam Hart at corner on day 2, Ricky Pearsall at wide receiver on day 2. Those are the most common mock draft picks that you will see among Colts fans. So I want to put a couple of other names out there that I think fit what the Colts like, fit what the Colts need, and also fit what Chris Ballard typically likes to do on draft day. So I started off a little easy, and Jake can even comment on some of these guys because I think all of them are Senior Bowl guys. So Jake was down there this year. But Max Melton, cornerback from Rutgers, I think that's a name to watch for the Colts on day 2. I think he actually makes more sense than someone like a Cam Hart even, because he's got more fluidity. He's got more positional flexibility. And I think even if he doesn't start on day 1, he's got the gunner mentality and the gunner speed to be out there being a productive player on this team from day 1. So Max Melton from Rutgers, I'm a big fan of him. I would take him in round 2. He's one of the few corners I would take in round 2, and he's got the arm length. He's got the physicality. He's got the good tape. I'm a huge fan of Max Melton.
Yeah, same here. I think he plays like a Colt. All of his pre-draft stuff is very much on brand. Again, I love the position flexibility as well. I think he plays through the whistle. And again, you have these guys that work out really well this time of year, but their tape doesn't always match it, and everything is in line for him. I'm a big fan of that. Basically, him, Cam Hart, and like TJ Tampa are my day 2 corners that I'm like, yes, if you could find a way to get one of those guys, if you take a pass catcher in round 1, of course, then totally fine with that.
Yeah. And Max Melton, one of his biggest highlights in college was running down an Ohio State running back from like 70 yards. It's a great highlight if you guys can find that on YouTube there. I went with a defensive tackle / defensive end with my next one. So I know Jake's going to get on me because he doesn't know where this guy's going to play in year 1. And I'm going to get the Matt Miller treatment from Jake here. But Darius Robinson from Missouri, I don't know if he's going to be there at 46 for the Colts. I know there's been some first round buzz for him, but I'm sorry. When I look at this guy, I just feel Chris Ballard like standing behind me, like whispering, like, yes, this is my guy. You know, you look at the length, you look at the size, you look at the production as a senior, you look at him just absolutely dominating the Senior Bowl this year in the pass rush drills and the one-on-ones. And I'm thinking like, okay, yeah, this is a Chris Ballard type of defensive end or / defensive tackle. So yeah, if they move on from DeForest Buckner after the season, if they move on from Adio Dengbo after the season, Darius Robinson could fit in perfectly. I'm not going to say he's going to be as productive as those guys, but he's kind of fit in that same type of mold, 35-inch arms, very productive player. He kind of looks like an Eric Armstead type guy on film to me. So yeah, Darius Robinson, I don't know if Chris Ballard's going to be able to resist him there at 46 if he somehow falls there come draft day.
Yeah, word is the league likes him a lot, and even if he does slip out of round 1, I can't really see him getting out of the top 40. For me, I think with following his athletic testing, because that's what I was really intrigued by. Like from the second I saw who this guy was, and then I saw him in one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl, I was like, this dude is absolutely a Colt. But again, his size, didn't really know where he was going to play. His athletic testing for me says interior. My dog is just fighting through it. Every single episode, you guys are going to hear her just fighting for her life over here. Anyways, so no, I would move him inside and basically just be your next Dio Dangbo. And if you can match him up with Dio Dangbo and, you re-sign Dio and you have two somewhat similar players, I think that's a really good idea. But yeah, the athletic testing, I've seen a lot of people compare him to like Cam Jordan coming out of Cal back in the day. I don't know. I think Cal is more, or Cam Jordan is more of like the exception to that, he's this awesome edge rusher, which Robinson could be in certain schemes and everything. But if we're looking specifically at the Colts, I really would follow the Dio path for him, which I know is mostly edge, but then you kick him inside a lot. He's just kind of a guy you have to see on the field first. And we've seen that in the past. Like Ben Banigou is a good example to me, like a guy who position flexibility, really athletic, and the Colts drafted him to actually be a Sam linebacker. But I don't even think he made it through his first week of little camp practices, the rookie mini camp, before they're like, okay, no, we're not going to do that. He's an edge. So that could be something teams decide after the first month or so with Robinson, where they really want to put him.
Yeah. And I got two more names here that are kind of, it's like a step down from the first two. The first two could totally see the Colts taking. These next two I've barely seen Colts fans talking about, but Ben Sinnott, tight end from Kansas State, and Bo Limmer, center from Arkansas. I know these are not names that Colts fans are talking about a lot, especially Sinnott, who, if Colts fans are basically saying, Brock Bowers or nobody at tight end. But if you look at the athletic testing, you look at the positional flexibility to play that sniffer tight end / H-back role, I think Sinnott makes a ton of sense for the Colts. He had a great season this past year, flipping back out to the tight end position, and done a lot of great things in that offense. And I really do think he would fit a lot of what the Colts offense does when it comes to their motion, their pre-snap movement, and stuff like that. And then Bo Limmer at center from Arkansas. Look, Ryan Kelly's not getting any younger. Will Fries is a free agent after the season. Limmer's a guy who started 40 games in college, mostly at right guard, and then switched to center this past year. Had a good Senior Bowl. He had just a fantastic combine. I think he ran really well, had a great explosion. Almost put up 40 on the bench press too, which is crazy at center. So yeah, Bo Limmer, I think, just screams, Colts type player as well. But Sinnott and Limmer are two guys that I'm commonly sending to them in round 3. Come my mock drafts, because they just make so much sense for the Colts.
Yeah, Ben Sinnott, I really wanted to more at the Senior Bowl. Everything looked great, pre-target. I just think he had some issues catching the ball down there, but in terms of getting separation, the fluidity and crispness of his routes, I really liked. So for me, I am kind of the thinking of, if it's not Bowers or Jatavian Sanders, get one of these hybrid type guys. Get a movable tight end who, I'm not talking a receiving type, but just like you mentioned, a guy that can block and be kind of a fullback.
Yeah. And then we got two more guys here to round it out. Adisa Isaac from Penn State kind of fits that speed rusher that the Colts like. He's very raw, but he's a player who, I think when you watch his film, it kind of screams Kwity Paye's Michigan film, where maybe he wasn't being used perfectly, but a lot of inside stunts that resulting in sacks, good length, good size, good speed, just didn't really put it all together in college, but he's a sneaky 3rd round option for the Colts. And then Tez Walker from North Carolina. If the Colts want to go back to the North Carolina wide receiver tree, Tez Walker is a vertical burner who doesn't really do much more than that. But look, the Colts are looking for some vertical speed right now. Tez Walker makes some sense that they miss out on the Troy Franklins and the Xavier Worthies of the world. So those are two guys that pop for me as high Chris Ballard fits, even if I didn't really love their film, but very, very high Chris Ballard fits that could be options in round 3 for the team.
Yeah, I really liked Tez Walker going into the Senior Bowl, and then the Senior Bowl happened, unfortunately. During practices and one-on-ones and stuff, I thought he was a great route runner. He got a lot of separation. It just literally, when the ball got to him, he could not catch it. And then you get to the actual game, and it's Sam Hartman all game, forcing the ball downfield to Tez Walker all game. It was just an ugly thing for both of them. And to me, I don't know what's more nail biting than having a field stretching receiver who you legitimately never know if they're going to catch it or not. I'm good on that. I really, really wanted to like him more than I do, but receivers who struggle to catch the ball is kind of a problem for me.
I get it. He's what people think Alec Pierce is then, because that's what
Yes.
people think Pierce can't catch, but
Yep.
Tez Walker might actually not be able to catch. But you guys let us know in the comment section which of those 6 players intrigues you the most. It'll probably end up being Max Melton, but we'll love to see your guys' answers there. Before we get out of here, if you guys want to learn more about all these players we talked about today, make sure you are pre-ordering the Indy Draft Guide, $8.99 with code DRAFTMISS in all caps, and you get access to an essential piece of reading for Colts fans both before and after the draft, featuring 225 in-depth scouting reports, features, and much more. Click the link in our show notes to pre-order today. And I do want to let you guys know that I went all out with Build-A-Ballard for that draft guide. I did Build-A-Ballards for every single position outside of quarterback. Did some really cool stuff with tier 1s and tier 2s of Build-A-Ballard fits. So if you guys want to see the most expansive Build-A-Ballard thing I've ever done, make sure you're pre-ordering that Indy Draft Guide. It should be out in the next week or two, right in your guys' hands here before the draft. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks too, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, where we list your podcast. We'd love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here with Locked On Colts tomorrow afternoon.